Hello, and welcome to the Leisurely Learning EquatIO series. In this series, we will go over in depth how to use the various parts of the EquatIO extension to best support your students. In this video, we will be reviewing the Mathspace tool. Let's get started. All right, so here I have my worksheet that I'm going to be working with. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the toolbar here. And I'm going to press on the Mathspace button, which is this cube with the EquatIO sign inside of it. So when I press on it, you're going to notice it opens up a new tab. If this is your first time using EquatIO, it will prompt you to sign in using your Google account. Now I want you to take a look at the toolbar. The toolbar is pretty much the same as what you would see inside of a Google Doc, minus these two buttons right here. The other thing I want you to note is that inside of settings under options, you will notice there's an extra tab here. So if you go to space options, you can actually change the background. So there is squared, which is what you default to, or you can choose blank. Now, regardless of what you choose as a teacher to create something, your students or your other users will see it as they have their settings on their computer. So it doesn't matter what you choose, they will see it as they see it. The other thing you can do is change the color. And again, your students will see it as they choose to see it, not as you choose to see it. So I'm just going to pick a nice pale yellow here to use. And you need to hit save here for it to remember these. There is some printing stuff here, but we're not going to worry too much about that because really you're not probably going to be doing a lot of printing. So here I have my plain background. Actually, I want to go back. I want to put in that grid background. So let's go back in and make sure that that's squared paper. Perfect. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I want to type in my question. Now, I want to really emphasize this. So if I started to type my question here and I type in the word represent, and I'm just going to go down and do it the proper way. So here I'm just typing represent, and down here I'm going to either press this insert text button, or I'm going to go in here and type TE to get the text button. And you'll notice that when you do that, you end up with this indented box. So I'm just going to show you the difference between them. So I'm going to insert both of these onto the page. I'm going to hide the bar for a second. And anytime you insert anything onto the page, you're going to notice that this sidebar appears. We'll talk a little bit more about the sidebar in a second, but I want to focus on this one. So this is the play button, and what it will do is it will read this information out loud.
To lines line 1, REPRESENT line 2, represent.
So ignoring the fact that there's that slight echo, because that's really more to do with the video recording than EquatIO. But the first line, it read each letter independently, and that's because it thinks it's a math variable, right? As opposed to the bottom where it thinks it's text. So that's something important to consider if your students require stuff to be read to them. It's especially important to use that text feature. And it's really just good practice because you can see even as I was typing this, you start getting a lot of this math prediction stuff coming up, and you really don't want that. So I'm going to just delete all this. We're going to start again. So I'm going to go TE. I'm going to write my question. And I'm going to do a fraction now. So I'm going to come out of the text, and I'm just going to write 7 over 10. So I get that nice math. I'm going to go text again. And what I'm going to do is I don't want my line to be too long because then I'm going to have to shrink my text quite a bit. So I'm going to go down to the next line. I'm going to go text again. I'm going to use this button this time. Okay. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace what's there. I'm going to hide this. Now, this bar, if it's in your way, there's two ways to do it. You can move this sidebar for yourself, or you can shrink it like this. So what I'm going to do, I typically leave it where it is because I want to know what the students are going to see, but I shrink it. Now, I am going to shrink this a little bit so that it fits properly on the page. Shrink it maybe a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Now, I want to really emphasize this instruction piece, so I'm going to put in a rectangle around that. So I'm going to start by going down to shapes down here at the bottom. And these are my standard shapes. So I'm going to take a rectangle and I'm just going to draw a rectangle around that. Now the standard default is red. So if we want to change the color, we're going to do a couple things, one of two things. So up here at the top, you're going to see these paint cans. The first one is your fill color. The second one, if you hover over it, sorry, I'll just hover over it again, is your border color. So I'm going to leave the border color as black, but I want to change my fill color and I'm going to make it green. Really, you can make it whatever you want because remember, my users are not going to see this yellow background. That's just for me. So I'm going to make it green. I might make it a little bit lighter. Okay, so it's a little bit lighter. I'm going to make sure that I've got my object selected and make it that green. Let's try that again. Okay, now when I want to get rid of this, I'm going to press the X and that gets rid of that bar. Now, I still can't really see my text here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maximize my sidebar. And I'm going to see here I have my buttons that chooses where it's going to go. So I want to send this to the back so that my text is in the front. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that these stay together. So you can either click on both and press the Shift key on your keyboard to group them together. And then you're going to notice that the group button is going to appear here on the side. Okay, I'm going to ungroup them for a second. The other thing you can do is just click somewhere on the page, holding your left mouse button down, drag until you see a blue dashed line appear around both of those, and then you will see that grouping tool as well. So now if I move one, it will move the other. Okay, so I've got that in there. Now I want to start putting in some questions. I want to put some divisions on my page so it's very clear. So I'm going to use the line tool. So I'm going to come in here, I'll put a line down. And I've got a bunch of things that I want to do, so I'm going to put in a few lines here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that these two lines line up nicely. So I'm going to go back here, go to my select tool. I'm going to select both those lines, and again, I'm going to come to my sidebar. And over here, I have some alignment buttons. So I want to make sure they both align to the left. Okay, I might need to make this one a bit longer. I'm just going to take it, drag it out a bit more, and there we go. And then what I'm going to do is just select them all and group them together. Fantastic. All right, now if I wanted to too, I could give this a label. I'm not going to put a label on this, so we'll just leave that for now. All right, so I'm going to start with my ratio. So I'm actually going to do this a little bit out of order. That's okay. I'm going to say that this is where I want my ratio to be. So I'm going to click here and make sure I'm clicking in the blue box. I'm going to type in text. I'm going to write ratio. And I'm going to insert that. And what you're going to notice is that whenever you insert something, it's always going to come to the top left. So just be aware of that. If you don't see it on the page, it's sometimes hidden there in the top text. So I've got my ratio here. And now I want to put in maybe a fun shape. So I don't necessarily want to use a standard shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to these three dots to more shapes. And I can actually go down here and I can search. And there are tons and tons and tons of shapes in here. They've got some logic gates in here. They've got some switches. So if you're doing science, you can build stuff that way, or computer sciences, some lenses. What I'm going to do is, oh, there it is. I'm going to choose the rocket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rocket. I'm going to go in here. And it's great that my rocket is transparent, so I don't necessarily need to worry about that. But what I do want to show you is if it does not come in transparent, so let's say it comes in as a color, and you don't want it to have any fill color because you want your student to do that, you're going to come down to this second bar here. That's your transparency bar, and you're just going to drag that down to the very end, and that's going to make it see-through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. So you have two ways that you can copy. You can use your shortcut key, so Control-C, and then Control-V. Oh, and that copied it full, so let's make that one transparent as well. And then you can use the paste button here. I'm going to paste that, and we'll paste again. And I'm just going to fix the color. Oops. Let's undo that. I'm going to fix the color on all of these. So I'm just going to go Shift, 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 and fix it so that they're all transparent. There we go. Perfect. Okay, I'm not going to group those ones together because I am going to want the students to change the color on them. All right, so the next thing I want to do is put in my fraction bar. So because I want them to be able to manipulate the fraction bar, I'm actually going to use smart shapes for this one. That's the hexagon with the light bulb inside. And they're called smart shapes because you can change the way they look. So just for your reference, because we're not going to use them all today, you have a number line, a grid, a protractor, a fraction circle, a fraction bar, coordinate plane, polygon, angle measure, compass, and clock. And I highly suggest you go in and play with them. What I'm going to use is the fraction bar. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to draw a fraction bar. And it actually doesn't matter that it's colored in. One of the things that I can do is if I wanted to, I could rotate it. So if I wanted it to be vertical, I could certainly change it like that. The other way you can rotate it is to use the green dot that also gives you a rotation feature. Let's just make sure that's straight again. All right, so we're going to click over here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here. We're going to go to number segments. Now this is a fraction out of 10, so I'm going to increase the number of segments here to 10. And actually, you could go all the way up to 100 if you want, but you can see when it's 100 that they're so close together on this side of the bar, you really can't see the different pieces. So I'm going to make that 10. And actually, because it's completely upside down, it's not starting on the right side. But sometimes you want it to be on a different side, so that's okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn the number of segments here to 0 right now. And my students would come in and they would change that to the appropriate number. I'm going to go in and put a hundreds chart in here now. So I'm going to go back to my shapes and I'm going to go to more shapes. Now I could search through this, but I'm just going to put in hundreds chart, base 10, I think it's called base 10. And you do actually have a choice between 3D and 2D. I don't want the 3D, so I'm going to go back to 2D blocks there. And I'm going to draw those. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to move them over a little bit. I'm just going to hide this. I'm actually going to click over here. I'm going to separate them now. I'm going to leave the 10s and the 1s selected. I typically teach them to do it vertically, so I'm going to move this vertically. Oops. Just hit undo on that. Make sure I've got this selected. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and make it transparent so that my students, when they go to use it, they can overlay them. And I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to teach my students to copy and paste it and drag it over top. I'm going to put it in number line. Number line, there is a standard number line in shapes. So if you went in here and you go number line, we'll give you a number line like this, but I want one that's going to be pre-created for me. So I'm going to go over to my smart shapes and I'm going to click on the number line here. I will draw my number line and I'm going to just drag that out to make it bigger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this sidebar. And now I have a couple of choices. So I'm going to start with segments. So I can add segments as I see fit. So I'm going to go in here and make it up to 10. Right? I can choose where I want it to start. Right? So I can actually have negatives in there if I wanted to. I'm going to leave it at 0. It's going to start at 0. I can choose how I want it to step. So I could go by 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. So those are all options. And then I can choose where I want the labels. So do I want them on top? Do I want them on the middle? Or do I want them on the bottom? So I got them on the bottom there. And I can adjust the stroke width here. So that's just making it skinnier or not. And stroke width and style you can actually do for all your tools. You can also change the border if you want it to be a dash border. Probably not for this. So we'll leave it as a straight one. So we've got that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to put in a dot for my students. So I'm going to make a little circle here. And I'll take that circle and we'll make it blue. Perfect. And then that way my students have something that they can put on there. All right. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put in some money. So I'm going to come down here. I'm not going to go to smart shapes. I'm going to go to regular shapes and I'm going to type in my search. I'm going to type in money. And you'll see you have a variety of different monies. I'm Canada, so we're going to use Canadian money. So I'm going to put in my coins for them. Yeah, we can leave it like that. Maybe looks good. And there we go. all ready to go. Now, this is the key important thing that you want to remember. So when I'm ready to insert this, okay, I'm not actually going to press insert math because insert math down here inserts what you've done with these tools here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come up to the right-hand side and I'm going to look for this blue circle with almost like an old-fashioned CD drive. And I'm going to press insert. And what that's going to do is that's going to take this information. And we're going to give it a second to think about it. And it's going to take it and it's going to put it in as an image in my worksheet. Wonderful. And you can see actually it's done that white background, right? So now when my students get this worksheet, when I've shared it with them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them click on that worksheet portion, okay, the picture, and press Edit Math. And it's actually going to bring it back up for them, and then they can manipulate it for them. Now, occasionally what will happen is that this button will change. So if your internet disconnects or if you accidentally close the document that this was supposed to go to, all right, you're going to see that that insert button disappears and it actually shows up as download. So when you press that button, what it does is it actually downloads it as an image. And then what you can do is you can actually go in and let's just reopen that worksheet. And then you can simply drag and drop that picture onto the page and it shows up there. Now, the one thing to remember with this is that because it's there as a picture now, it's no longer editable with EquatIO. So if you go to press Edit Math, nothing is going to happen with it. But if your students are working on something and for some reason that internet disconnects, it's a great way of still being able to give them a way to get that information in so they don't have to go back and recreate everything from the start. Okay, so that is the Mathspace. If you have any questions, be sure to use the link below to access the EquatIO video question form. Be sure to leave an email so that we can respond to your questions. Thank you for watching this video.